to call myself. I'm certified in career coaching. And I have a lot of favorite sports, but one of my favorite sports is football. And our coach out here in Boston is Bill Belichick of the New England Patriots. And I always say to students and scholars and fellows that it's not that you don't know how to play the game, right? Because whatever sport you play or instrument, because I play the piano, whatever it is, you know how to orchestrate and do what you do well. But one thing everybody has in common, no matter their background, no matter what sport they play, what company they work for, what school they're at, they all have a coach at the end of the day, right? To help with strategy and to see the blind spots. So I hope today some of the answers that I give you will help add to you reducing the amount of blind spots when it comes to your own personal brand.
Yes, I would definitely agree to that. Thank you so much, Natascha. So just to go over today, we'll have a little Q&A moderated by me, and then we'll have some questions from you all. So if you guys don't mind, while I ask them some of the questions, to put some questions in the chat that you might have for Natascha. And yeah, I would love to get started if y'all are ready. So yes, we can start with the Q&A now. Natascha, are you ready?
Yes, sure.
Yes. So the first question that we had is, how do you really define personal branding? And why is building personal branding important?
So how and why?
Yes.
Right before I give my answer, I do want to say my perspective is going to be unique, I think. More than most, it may not be your typical definition of branding, but my background has a lot of unique challenges, I would say, whether it's a brain issue that I had, or a brother who was killed in the city of Boston, or growing up in low-income housing, or me being a first gen. There's a lot that I've had to overcome to be where I am now. And so that's going to set the tone for my answers. So if I seem really excited, or my answers might be a little huge and broad, that's why. It's because my background, I've had to overcome so much that I feel like there is nothing we cannot do if we have the right strategy and the right support, okay? So when I think of personal branding, my own definition of that is when we're using all that we have, right? And all that we know in order to market ourselves. One of my favorite quotes of all times is by a tennis player named Arthur Ashe. And he says, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So that brings personal branding down to our level when we want to think about branding. And another thing I'm going to add about that, in addition to using all that you have for your own betterment of other people and your own reputation, is to think about it as it's not just who you know, but it's who knows you. At the end of the day, is it fair? No. Is it just? Absolutely not. Especially when someone like me comes from low income and a first gen. Is that fair? Nope, it's not. And I used to literally go to some of these really rich neighborhoods and stare in the windows and watch people walk through the store. How did they walk? How did they talk? What did they wear? And I noticed that a lot of wealthy people where I'm from wear all black. So when I used to do a lot of networking, I'd be like, okay, let me put on my all black because that seems to be the color they're wearing. And so I created a formula for personal branding. I'm going to repeat it a few times, and I'm going to ask you all, if you're listening, if there's one thing you write down, it's what I'm about to give you right now. Okay, just one thing when it comes to my definition of branding. It's made up of 5 parts, okay? And the letters are micro, M-I-C-R-O, M-I-C-R-O. And if anybody is chatting right now, feel free to put this in the chat, M-I-C-R-O. The M stands for materials, and I'll cover stuff in detail later. The M stands for materials, I stands for image, C stands for communication, R stands for your reputation, and O stands for online presence. So in Natascha's world, how she defines personal branding, using all that you have to get what you want, recognizing that it's not just about who you know, but it's who knows you. And the 5 quadrants of personal branding that I created is called micro: materials, image, communication, reputation, and online presence. All of the things we do can fit into one of those 5 quadrants. And it's important because if you want to leave your impact on the world, then you are going to have to think about your own personal brand.
Right. I definitely want to touch base upon something very important that you said, part of your 5 tips. I would say for the online presence, I know in this day and age with everything going on, everything is like online and we're just working on our digital fitness. So what would you recommend, for, everyone just getting familiar with the online aspect of how the world is going around now? What tips do you have to better your online presence overall?
Sure. I'm making notes, everyone. Okay. So bettering your online presence, I think I'm just going to say 2 things to that because there's a lot when it comes to online. I'm going to say, who do you follow and decide your platform? Who do you follow and decide your platform? So I think that sometimes we can think we need to be everywhere doing everything on every platform, but you should take some time to think about, do I want to be on Twitter? Do I want to be on Snapchat? Do I want to be on Instagram? Do I want to be on Facebook? Do I want to be on LinkedIn? Just take a moment one day and just sit back and think, there's so many platforms. Where do I really want to be? Where do I really want to put my energy and my effort, right? Where am I being fed information that is useful to me? First of all, let's just think about that, right? So once you just spend some time with yourself thinking about that, then you decide, how do you want to show up on those platforms? Now, I mean that in essence that you could have a platform that you just lock down your name, but you don't use, right? Because I am a big proponent of you owning everything out there with your name on it. If it's Twitter, if it's SlideShare, I don't care, whatever it is, lock down your name and hold it. But it doesn't mean you have to engage on that platform. But I want you to own your name on that platform. Own your YouTube channel with your name. But it doesn't mean you have to engage now. I just wouldn't want you to come to a point where you might need it and you don't own it because someone else took the name, right? So I want you to think about that, but just be picky. And I think that when you decide who you want to follow, that either feeds you, that you admire, then you should go where they are. So for me, I do own my name on multiple platforms. LinkedIn has been my bread and butter. Why? Because everyone across the globe uses that for professional gain, for speaking opportunities, for publishing your blogs and articles. If you don't have a website, you have LinkedIn. So that is, in my opinion, the hub of where you should be, but that still should be a case-by-case decision. But if you think about it, I know in my field, here are 2 or 3 leaders that I follow. I almost emulate slightly. I'm going to be where they are. So you need to think about your own career paths that interest you, companies that you're targeting, right? A lot of times students are targeting certain global organizations, and I'm like, you realize they go live on Facebook every week, right? Or live on LinkedIn every week. You can join their chats live, So it's important for you to start thinking about that, but just pause. The answer is different for everybody. Take a minute, decide your platform. Do you want to engage? Do you want to push content or do you want to just share content? That's another thing you need to think about. Push your own, share others, or do both. So hopefully that answers helps you just kind of think a little bit more strategically about your particular platform.
Wow, thank you for that.
Yeah.
That was absolutely so helpful because I know all of us are using social media nowadays, and it's a great way for, us to connect to other platforms and other, people in the industries that we're looking into. So thank you for that answer.
And just if I can add one thing too, like I had a chance to be featured in this book with it was about former President Obama. And would you believe that the opportunity to write the chapter in that book came to me through social media? Someone DM'd me and was like, hey, we follow the content that you post. Are you interested in writing this chapter? And I was like, okay, is this legit? So I did my due diligence and the publishing company was legit and they were almost finished with the book, but they were so impressed with the content I pushed out, they were giving me 48 hours to come up with a chapter. That's not a lot of time, right? But I said yes, and I shut everything down and got it done and delivered the chapter and was able to write on youth and unemployment, right? And fast forward to that's information that I'm using now in my doctoral dissertation, which I'm hoping to be Dr. Tasha by next year. So I say that to say social media is great for interacting, but you are being watched, you are being followed. And the information you post could get you an opportunity to write a book, or I was quoted in the New York Times based off of that. So it's important for you all to think about that.
I hope everyone's taking notes because I definitely am. That was great advice. Thank you so much. So now we'll be moving on to something more relatable. So I wanted to ask, is personal and creative branding essential for social impact? I know you've done a lot of work in that aspect of social impact, and I really wanted to know how important is it for, to have a personal and creative brand?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I'm going to need you to guide me to stay on this answer to make sure I'm delivering, okay? Because my mind is all just thinking all over the place. So essential, yes, you really have no choice. I wish we had a choice, right? But we really don't. We're almost being forced down this lane and we just want to utilize it and capitalize on it as much as possible. And an example of why this is essential. Okay, so for years, I have my online presence, posting content, HR, hiring, training, development, job stuff, just sharing with the community. That's it. That's all you're doing is sharing your knowledge with the community. And so I end up relocating to another city and town that I've never visited in my life, ever. Okay, and I get this grandiose idea. I'm going to email the mayor's office in this town, which is our local and city governmental officials, right? I'm like, they need to know that I've moved to their town and I'm passionate about youth and students and employment issues. And so literally in Malden, true story, he's an awesome mayor. And so I send this email, hi, I'm Natascha Saunders, started this, social company called Youth Career Coach Incorporated, and literally straight to the mayor's office, not to the assistant. I find an email and I'm emailing. And I just want you to know that I'm new in this town and I really would like to maybe connect with you to see what you're doing about students and youth and employment. Summer jobs is coming up. And so Mayor Christensen, shout out, okay, responds to my email. But this is what he says. He says, Natascha. Now, do you all remember the R in micro? What was the R? Put it in the chat. Does anybody remember the R? What did the R stand for in micro? I'm going to wait till I see. Yes. Okay. So he says to me, Natascha, your reputation precedes you. Yes, we can have a meeting. What? like, stop it. Your reputation precedes you. I feel like crying now and having goosebumps because, you know, when I think of my family struggles and growing up in a home with domestic violence, being a first gen, and here I am with the nerve to email the government official to say, I moved to your town. And he says, your reputation precedes you. And it was because there was a lady in the office who I did not know and had not met, but was one of my followers on social media. And so when he said that he saw the email and he says my name out loud, the lady says, hey, I follow her on social media on LinkedIn. Yes, we need to meet with her. And so I'm trying not to cry because I get really emotional because I want you all to just not limit yourselves and don't limit yourself. Whatever your background is, you go for it. Even when people say, why are you going to reach out to that person? Don't reach out to that person. Reach out. If you get a no, fine, you didn't lose anything. Maybe they saw your name and they're going to remember it next time you email them. So it is essential, but in ways that we may not know that it's essential yet. So you start building your brand now, trust me, it will pay dividends later. And that's what it did for me. So long answer, I apologize, I get emotional, but you know. Yes.
No, we love it here. Trust me, I think I was touched. Everyone is touched, especially a woman from, you know, I am a Black woman. I, you know, encounter, and I could speak for most Black women, encounter a lot of challenges in, you know, just the professional field sometimes. So it's very empowering to hear where you came from and just your story and your upbringing. So it's very powerful. I am honored just to be here and hear what you have to say, because honestly, I'm getting goosebumps as well. So you're doing great.
Okay.
Before I have a couple more questions, but before that, I would like to remind everyone to please in the chat say your names and where you're from, what country you're from, and your university, just to get acquainted and connect. Also, please post any questions that you might have for Natascha so we can touch upon it later in our Q&A session with all of you fellows. So yeah, for another question that I had was also social impact work. You have done a lot for the community from your past experience, and everyone in your global webinar email, you have a long history of Natascha's, you know, past experiences, and you can also look her up pretty much. Like, she's on LinkedIn and she's everywhere. Please connect with her and you know, try to see what kind of person she is, because I'm truly impressed. So yeah, another question that I had in regards to social impact is what really led you down this path? You know, you, like you mentioned, you went through a lot, and you briefly mentioned it earlier about your brother and just life before you got I mean, if you guys see her intro, she has multiple titles, which for a woman of our background, I am so proud to hear. And yeah, what led you to the path of social impact?
So I'm thinking of a few things, and if I look down, it's just because I'm taking notes. I have a learning disability, so I like to write my answers out a little bit before I deliver them. Okay, so what led me down that path, which I would say is really my business. So I'd say the first thing that came to mind was volunteering, becoming Miss Black Rhode Island, and being a Goodwill ambassador to the Gambia in West Africa. So all of this kind of played a part into my social startup, right? So with the volunteering piece, there are some organizations here in New England called the NAACP and the National Urban League. And they're both advocates really for social justice issues, criminal rights, education, labor reform, and volunteering actually pushed me forward. So tying that to your personal brand, when you volunteer, you learn, you grow in your skill set, right? You learn something new, you grow in your skill set, but you also gain social capital. So when you're coming from a low socioeconomic background or first gen, or even if you're not, even if maybe your parents are highly educated, but you're taking a different path, you still have to build your own social capital. So volunteering for those organizations gave me access. It gave me a platform to speak on issues that were important to me. And then it put me into rooms with political stakeholders, right? So that started pushing me. So here I am volunteering for the NAACP, helping to focus on education and labor reform and wages and jobs for the community. I then get asked to host an event, and now I'm on video camera at the event. Then at the time, presidential nominee John Kerry, who was running for president here in the United States, comes into the room. I'm on camera. I get asked to interview John Kerry. Now I'm moving up the chain, right? That's social impact, social policy, social capital, invisible capital. It's all growing, right? But it started because I was a volunteer. I got on a committee. I learned my content. I spoke on issues. I got placed in a room, asked to do an interview, and now I'm face to face with a political constituent. So it kind of grew from that, right? And then the other part was when I had won or earned the title of Miss Black Rhode Island USA, I have to be honest, I'm not a pageant girl. I'm not tall. I'm not thin. It's just not my thing. But they said, if you win the title, you get to go to Africa. And I was like, oh, it's on. It's all I want to do. That's it. And so when I earned that title and had a chance to be flown to Gambia to be appointed as a Goodwill ambassador with all of the other women that were in the organization, it just opened my eyes in a different way, in a more entrepreneurial way, I would say. And people had these assumptions about Africa, just these bogus assumptions, right? And so when I got there, what I saw was the entrepreneurial spirit. You have an idea, you have a product, you're gonna sell it, you're gonna market it. And so that started pushing me, right? So we got volunteering and then Goodwill ambassador pushing me to edge, like, okay, maybe, I don't know. And then I had a job that I would interview students, right? Usually it would be like their first job. It was in retail at a store. And I would interview students that were looking for a job. Some students I couldn't hire, but I wanted to hire them. Either they didn't present themselves well, didn't answer cohesive questions. And so although I couldn't hire those students, what I did, which I don't recommend because it's policies, but what I did at the time was I said, I cannot hire you, but I can help you outside of this job. So if you reach out to me, I'm gonna meet you at the local library and we're gonna go over cover letters and resumes and interviewing prep and what to wear in the interview. And remember, even that, I definitely wasn't the richest, so I wore all black. I was working on my master's in business administration and didn't even own a computer. I would have to walk to my campus to ask to use the computer lab because they had computers on campus. So you see this master's in business administration, but I didn't even have my own computer at the time. And so all of that led me and kind of pushed me into seeing that there was a need for career development. There was a need for coaching young professionals through their kind of footprint of what their lives could be. And so that's kind of where the business and the kind of where all of that just sprung up from. It wasn't a plan. I was asked for a tax ID number one time for a speaking engagement. I didn't know what that was at the time. And I said, well, how long do I have to get back to you on that information? They gave me some time. I knew one person who owned a local newspaper in my town, Peter Wells. I will never forget him. He owned the paper, which meant that he had a business. So I reached out to the guy and said, Mr. Wells, they're asking me for a tax ID number. I don't know what that is. And I really want this engagement. I want to be paid for it. So he was like, I'm going to send you to my lawyer and my accountant. Okay. And I walked into the accountant's office. Trish, shout out. Okay. Talked to her yesterday. 10 years later, she's still my accountant to this day for my business. So none of it was planned. It was volunteering. Miss Black Rhode Island, USA, Goodwill Ambassador, speaking engagement. Someone says, hey, I want to pay you for this, but you need a tax ID number. I didn't know what to do. I called the guy who owned the local newspaper. He sent me to his lawyer, his accountant. Then I was in business. 10 years later, I'm still running.
Wow, that's an amazing example. Like, I think, yeah, please everyone take notes and follow what this woman is saying because it's pretty powerful. One last question, but before I get to it, I wanted to ask every fellow to please ask all your questions in the chat. We'll be starting the Q&A for the fellows pretty soon. So as we graduate, as Millennium Fellows graduate, and we're gonna pursue different career paths, what advice do you have so that we can build our own personal brand and stand out as we launch our careers?
Okay, great question. Seasons. Okay, so 3 things I'm thinking about. If you're gonna graduate soon and you're thinking about, like you said, your own brand and what's next for you. And if I'm off the question, let me know, okay? Just come back and rephrase it for me. But my instinct was 3 areas. Was number 1, I cannot drill enough my micro formula for you to use as your rubric. So similar to how you take a test and there's a test answer sheet, or you write a paper and the teacher has a rubric to decide how you're going to get the grade that you're going to earn on this assignment, then you should use my micro formula in order to assess where you are. Are your materials on point? The M in materials basically is like your resumes and cover letters and things like that. Your I is your image, whether that's your photo or how you dress or anything in the image category. Sometimes it's helpful to identify with a few leaders in your space and look at their style and see how you want to you have your own unique identity, but you might be able to get a few tips from a few people you like to follow. That C for communication is also how you speak. Believe it or not, I have a writing disability. And so I have an app on my computer. It's called Grammarly. And Grammarly helps me, right, to check my English and my commas. And sometimes even when I can't pronounce words, I go to dictionary.com and I literally put in the word and I listen to it over and over again to get my pronunciation where it needs to be. I do that literally all the time. So your communication is very important for you to think about. And that reputation piece, that's kind of a fun one. At the end of every year or the beginning of the incoming year, I send a blanket, blind, anonymous survey to people in my network, people that I may have worked with, a classmate, family member, and I ask them to kind of share their opinions about me. Should I do what I think I want to do? Is there something about me that you think I should change? What advice do you have for me? When people are asked to answer that anonymously, they can be brutally honest. And It's not always easy to handle. Let me warn you. So if you do it, be ready, because I definitely have read some stuff about myself and I was like, oh man, who said that? So, but one of my favorite books is called The 48 Laws of Power. And one of the laws is keeping your enemies closer, because we like to know what they think. And so I like to know what they think. Maybe I can't change it and I can't address it, but every now and again, I like to know. So however you manage getting that information anonymously about your reputation is important. And you can create it yourself. Don't overthink it. You could create a Google form with questions like, you know, should I dress the way that I dress? Should I pursue this particular career? What do you think I should be doing? How's our relationship? Don't overthink it. It's just good feedback. And then we already talked about online. So if you're about to graduate, get that micro on target. And I wrote an article. You should be able to find it on LinkedIn. If not, I can always email it to you and you can forward it out. But it's called The 7 People You Need on Your Personal Advisory Board. Make a note. The 7 people you need on your personal advisory board. So just like there is a corporation, right? Corporations have boards of directors, right? To kind of tell them how they should move and where they should put money and, oh, we're going to do a layoff. We got to come back together and talk about this. Well, you're your own branding entity, you yourself. So you need to think about 7 people that are kind of your own committee. So when I need to make a money decision, I go to this person, right? I got someone that I say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? If I know I'm up for a new job opportunity, I got someone that, okay, I'm gonna go to you for that. If I am sad, depressed, filled with anxiety, on my personal advisory board, I say you need a spiritual advisor / therapist, whatever you do and how you do it, whatever you call them. But that person should be on your advisory board. So micro, create your own advisory board. And the last thing is, don't be caught up in thinking you can only do one thing. Maybe you could do one thing right now, right? You do one thing at a time. But I was a triple major in undergrad. Now, am I recommending that? No, not necessarily. But honestly, I couldn't decide. I loved fashion. I loved fitness, which was exercise science. I loved finance. The 3 things I love: fashion, fitness, and finance. So I couldn't decide. So I studied all 3. And I started first my career in finance. I went hard in finance. I focused in the market. That's what I did. And then eventually I pivoted. And so, yes, I do get it. Everyone, there's so much pressure. What are you going to do? Pick one thing. And I get it, right? I totally get it. But pick it. And then maybe your volunteer stuff is the heart, right? Maybe you are that engineering major or a business major or a medical student, and you pursue that and go for it. But on your volunteer time, that's where you can say, you know what, my heart is here. So while I'm getting this medical degree, I'm going to volunteer in this community, or I'm going to mentor somebody who wants to be an artist, or I'm going to join a committee that's focused on dance and be a part of that in my part-time, but my full-time is in medicine. And so I want you to just think about that, because we're filled with so many things, whether it's the science and STEM, the policy, or the arts, right? We kind of have all of that within us. So even though I was the finance person first, my volunteer stuff was in the community. I played the piano and did concerts, and I kept that side of me also going as fuel. So just be mindful of that. So the 3 things: micro, create your advisory board, and then beware of the seasons. Do this now, keep a little side hustle, and then just keep it moving. But if you pivot, don't ever feel bad about pivoting. Perhaps your calling in that season has been completed, and now you're being called to do something else. And don't let anyone make you feel bad about pivoting. That's okay. We got a long life to live and we got work to do.
Right. I mean, I think everyone is saying everything I want to say right now in the chat. I commend you for it's very impressive what you're saying. So we can start with the portion of the Q&A from the fellows. I will start calling on questions. So if I call on your name, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself with your name, your country, and your university, and then you feel free to ask your question. So we're gonna start with Basie. Basie, are you around? Okay, so we will move on to the next question, and then we'll get back to Basie later. So we have Eunice. Eunice, can you please ask a question and always state your name, your university, and your country? Eunice?
Hello, everyone.
Hi,
Hi.
Eunice.
So, was there a point you felt like quitting, or just the thought just crossed your mind? Was there a point, and how do you face it?
That's a good question, Eunice. So if I heard you correctly, if I didn't, let me know. But the main word that I heard jump out was quitting. And do I ever feel like quitting? So feelings are a unique thing, right? Like feelings. They're just like right now, I feel nervous. I always get nervous before I speak. I don't even eat before I speak. That's how nervous I get. So the feeling of quitting and giving it all up and calling it a day and asking the good old heavens to take me on home, I have thought about it from time to time. I do. But I think what keeps me grounded is knowing that I have a purpose to fulfill and an assignment on the earth. And that may sound super spiritual, but I am a very spiritual person. I have to be to kind of keep my sanity going here. And there's no way I could come back from being sexually assaulted myself, from seeing my brother die. My mom said I passed out. It just was a traumatic event. To now my mom has an illness. She's been in the ER all week, and she's in the ER right now as I'm talking to you. So there are many moments where I think about it, but I feel like if I wake up and I have life and I have breath, then that means my assignment is not done. So I say to myself, well, please give me today what I need to do, what I need to hear, what I need to say, what I need to learn, and then I just go about that day. So I think that, yes, I've wanted to quit on many occasions, but if I'm alive, my belief tells me it's for a reason. And my belief also tells me that those of us that have the highest hills to climb and the biggest barriers to overcome, for whatever reason, I don't know, but that means we have the biggest assignment and the biggest impact, right? And so we got to keep that in mind. Once again, like I opened with, is it fair? No. Is it just? No. But it is what it is. And so if you've been granted life and you roll over tomorrow and you wake up and those eyes open, it's because your assignment is not yet done. And so that's kind of what keeps me going on not quitting, because there's work to be done. So we can't quit.
Right. Yeah, for all of you, if you can remember anything from this webinar, just remember to not quit. I think that's one of
But get help though. Let me reiterate that. When I said earlier about the personal advisory board, I take that to heart. So whenever I am at a breaking point, I'm wise enough to know I've got to seek assistance. Now, that may look differently for each of you, but I have one mentor and I have many. But this one mentor, all he does is pray for me. I'm gonna be honest. He doesn't have a conversation. He just knows if he sees me calling, he better go to prayer because I need it. And then he does what he does, hangs up the phone, and I go about my daily life. And I've also started meditating as well, which is helping. But you gotta put somebody on your team that you can call if and when needed. Okay, that's very important across the board. No matter how much money you make, what gender you are, you gotta have someone on your team that's gonna balance out your spirituality so that you could keep going when you feel like quitting.
Right. I think that's a big part of communicating, as I see everyone in the chat saying communication. Yeah, just being in tune with yourself and getting to know your needs and how you can proceed. So thank you for that, Natascha. We can move on to our next question from Hassan. So Hassan, if you'd like to unmute yourself with and mention your name. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, dearest Natascha. Thank you for a beautiful smile, for a beautiful heart, for a beautiful mind. And really very inspiring, very inspiring. I'm honored to learn from women. As a feminist man I am. And now, have you ever faced or covert discrimination due to your gender and color? If we're considering the structural racism and patriarchal structure of capitalist society, and what did you do? What is your resilience energy?
So discrimination when it comes to gender or color or race, right? Did I have it right, the question?
Right.
Okay. Ooh, that's a big one. That's a big question. So give me a second, everyone. Let me gather my thoughts. Okay. All right. So I'm going to say yes, but I have to be honest. I am still grappling with what's going on in our climate now. Still trying to acknowledge what my own experiences have been in the process too. So I'm still on the fence about this, but I will say I instantly thought of three things. I thought of when I was a kid, my mom had put me in this private school for care. And I was the only Black child in that care program. And I distinctly remembered having to sleep in the corner of that when it was nap time. And I would have to clean up all the kids' plates and food. And I would walk by this ridiculously scary dog to bring the plates and the food to the lady in the kitchen. But I would always get scared because the dog would jump at me. I would drop the plates and then they would banish me to the corner for whatever, for my own little timeout thing. I also think about, in Boston, we have a program called Metco. Basically what that is they take kids of color out of our communities and they put us on a bus about 1.5 hours outside of where we live to go to school in all white affluent communities. I was a part of that busing program. So I'd wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. My mom would get me dressed. We'd get down to the bus stop and I would get to school around 7:30. there were a lot of instances in that experience that helped me academically, right, to give me a leg up. But there was a few times you're being called the N-word, things are written on your locker. Do you really belong here? So I remember that, right? And then as a professional, I see sometimes I feel like, you know, I've always really been the only one in the many of my jobs in my space, especially in the Ivy League communities. And so I've observed how colleagues might be able to do things and be invited to sit at a table and be invited to have a meeting about something that I don't get invited to attend. I see that. I see who they get to have lunch with, who they get to do speaking engagements for, and who asks them to participate. So I notice that, but I don't get asked that, right? And so it's interesting because this morning I said to myself, okay, I would need to move into this space and I'm not being invited to sit at the table. What do I need to do about this, right? Because we got to think about this. How do we get invited to the table? And I said, okay, this is politics. I need allies and I need other people to ask on my behalf. Sometimes they say, go for it, apply, do this. But at other times you need other people to send an email on your behalf to say, hey, we really want to use Natascha for this. And then they push for it and they push for you. We got to be more open to that. So the question of the discrimination, yes, it's there. I'm still thinking about it. But the how have I navigated it is you're going to need some allies, and the allies might be a different gender and they might be a different race. And they definitely will be older than yourself sometimes. And so I might seek someone that's 65, 70 plus for a reason, okay? Because they might be a good ally because I see that, wow, they're being invited to places that I'm not. I might need to partner with this person because they like to give back. But in other cases, I may have a younger person who's 10 years younger than me that has a little bit of pull because they're younger and they're vibrant and they got new ideas and everyone's following them. And so I might make someone who's 10 years younger than me be a mentor to me. And people think, what? Isn't that the opposite? It's all case by case. So for me to navigate some of these environments where I don't feel as though I'm being included or valued or invited for a seat at the table, I've had to think strategically, who else has power here? I will ask them to send an email to so-and-so to ask for my help. That way it's not coming up from me, bottom up, it's coming top down. So for you to think about your own careers, your own academic journeys, I mean, even in team projects, I've noticed when someone on my team is being heard a little bit more by the powers that be. I hear that. Does it feel good all the time? No. But in the 48 laws of power, we got to be strategic, right? So I may go to this person and say, listen, I have an idea and I want you to put it on the table. And they're like, me, but what if I'm like, just put it on the table, just get it on the table, and then we'll take it from there, right? So long answer, Hassan, but yes, in multiple areas, but find the allies and think to yourself, might not be top down, bottom down, you know, you're gonna have to think about that, okay? Who are you gonna get to represent for you and to ask on your behalf, okay? And I'm real good at that because I'll have them blind BCC me on an email in a minute so I can see that they did it. And then I'm like, okay, we in motion here. So you got to also learn that politics. And remember I said, is it fair? No. Is it just? No. But we got to do what we got to do.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Amazing. Yeah, we'll move on to the next question. This is our last question for today, but definitely feel free to reach out to Natascha for more questions on her LinkedIn, as she mentioned earlier. So this question is from Sneha Mahesh. If you can mute yourself, and we'll have you introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you. Hi.
So first of all, thank you for this great session. And myself, Sneha Mahesh from India, a final year social work student. And we usually go for semester fieldworks in rural areas. And we do often talk about career guidance creation as a major component during our rural fieldworks that we have. But as you also mentioned, internet, computer, accessibility are always a great barrier to taking forward that in their areas. So what advice do you have for us to address these issues, talking on behalf of them? Because we do find it difficult.
All right, awesome. I did see that question and I was thinking about it, and two things come to mind, and forgive me if they are not helpful. I hope they are, but sometimes I just may not know the answer, to be completely honest. And so I was thinking about, I was invited to speak in, it's called Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. I had never been there. I didn't even know Black people were there, to be honest, or any people of color for that matter. So I get invited to speak, and a college was bringing me. What I didn't know at the time was it is so rural and farm area that they literally had to drive out to pick up people in vans to bring them to my presentation, because that community does not have internet. And I was like, okay, I'm in the US, really? And there's so, like I said, there's so many myths we can dispel about the United States. And so I was just sitting there like, how do I reach this community when they don't even have the internet? And so I went back and thought about good old fashioned bartering. And basically bartering is, you got goods, I got goods, we're gonna trade for goods. And then I thought, okay, we can work with this. Now, I don't know if that's something that you can do in your community to get things started, but it was something that worked for our community. But the biggest outlier, so to speak, was we had to find a sponsor. And you got to realize you cannot do what you cannot do because you may not have enough power or resources. So we had to find, it was at the time Lake State Superior College. They agreed to basically upfront these costs and sponsor and bring these people together to help think about what this looks like, to help advocate in numbers, to get an internet pole, a wire pole in that community for the residents that live there. But you can't do that without the numbers. And so my instinct from a case management perspective is, can we think about their immediate needs? Their immediate needs might require you to come up with a bartering system to sustain them in the immediate. But the bigger question is, those of you that are leaving that community, who else can you invite to the table? You're gonna have to get sponsors, get a university, somebody to say, hey, this is what we can do to help you, whether it's provide a van to bring people once a week for the internet, for the computer lab, which is what this school did for people, and then push further to see if we can get some type of electric pole in that community for Wi-Fi. But it was a huge rural farming community. So I don't have the exact answer, but what I can think about is you forming a community and a committee to to address the issue so that there's more people coming to the table with ideas, solve their immediate needs. There's something called the Maslow hierarchy of needs. If their basic food shelter is not met, then they can't even function about anything else. So consider the bartering methodology, and then who are you going to get to sponsor that community? I think it's totally possible. Yeah. That was a tough one too. So email me, because I'd be happy to brainstorm offline or something. That was a big one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Natascha. I mean, this was a great session, and I know us fellows have so many more questions for you, and you just seem to have all the answers, all the right answers. So we would love to connect with you. So if you don't mind leaving your information in the chat for anyone who has a question or would like to connect with you, if you can leave that in the chat really quick. So besides that, thank you everyone for joining us. And thank you so much, Natascha. We had a great time. I definitely had a great time listening to you. I can listen to you talk all day. Our session is coming to an end, but as Natascha put in the chat, she has her website and she put her business info in the chat. So please reach out to her if you have any more additional questions that we didn't get to today. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to reach out to you and connect with you on LinkedIn, Natascha.
Sounds good. All right, everyone, stay encouraged and get some rest. That's important. All right. Bye.
Also, just quickly, do you have any closing points for anyone who's still here?
You know, I don't know if it's a closing point, but there's a lot going on in all of our worlds these days. And so I used to say, you know, oh, take it, you know, 1 year at a time. And then it became 1 month at a time. And then it became 1 week at a time. And then it used to be take it 1 day at a time. And now I was like, no, one hour at a time. And so that's just where I'm at right now is there's so much information I know I gave. There's so much you can read online. There's so much your friends and family and educators and teachers have to say about everything under the sun. But just take some time to just let it digest. And, you know, I bake cakes from scratch, I must say. So I do a lot of sifting of flour. So take all of my information and others every day and just pause with it and sift it. What do I keep? What do I use? What do I ignore? What do I file away for later? Because some of this information, it might be for next year, right? It doesn't have to be right now. So I just want us to just take a minute and just try to get sleep. I'm working on my sleep. Try to get some sleep. Try to rest. And just take it 1 hour at a time. So just start there.
Right. Absolutely. I believe we should all take that advice and get some rest and just be in tune with ourselves just to advance in our goals and all of our projects. So good luck to everyone. And thank you so much, Natascha, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for sticking with me. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.